Welcome to Our Weird World. I'm your host, John Henson, and this week, being kind of oddly inspirational. I know that's not really my go-to. Fun little fact about me. So, like, we do a lot of like personality tests and stuff like that at my day job. And one of the tests that I took was something called the Clifton Strengths. And basically what it does is it's a bunch of different questions, and then it ranks 34 different strengths. They say you don't have weaknesses, but whatever. And, so like they ranked like what my strongest strength was, what my least strongest strength was. That's fun to say. And, like my number one strength was context, which means like I'm always looking into the past to understand the present, which, God, if that's not true, that's the biggest part of the reason why I look at, do this show. But my lowest strength was positivity. And like, okay, according to them, like, it doesn't mean that I'm a negative person, but like, I'm not exactly like Mr. Optimist either. But this week's episode, we are looking at three stories, some inspiring stories of three dudes who were absolute heroes. We are looking at the stories of Ed Ray, Wag Dodge, and after the fancy music, the story of Clifford Johnson. On November 28th, 1942, the Cocoanut Grove Nightclub in Boston was having just another great evening, right? People were out for a wonderful night just to try to forget how awful Hitler was and to just maybe even potentially find a nice person to mouth kiss at the end of the evening. Down in the Melody Lounge, one particular young man had his eyes on a lady that he really wanted to mouth kiss, right? Just a mwah, 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 get all up in there. But he didn't want everyone to like watch them do it in public. And so to fix that problem, rather than like, I don't know, go up to her and ask her out and maybe go somewhere private, instead this dude grabs his chair and pushes it over to a collection of like artificial palm trees that were set up as a decoration, climbs up in the chair, and then unscrews a light bulb that was kind of dangling among the decorations. Now, did this man, this is not Clifford Johnson, by the way, this is just some dingling. Did this man get his mouth kiss? I would like to think so, right? Because he unscrews the light bulb. It gets a little bit darker. Maybe he goes over, he makes his move. Like, hey, baby, want to go get some smooching? I don't know. They talk weird back then. But as the night drew to a close, all right, because look, maybe he gets his mouth kiss, whatever, but he doesn't screw the light bulb back in, so it's still dark in there. And so as the night drew to a close, a 16-year-old busboy was ordered to screw the bulb back in. However, because it was so dark and there weren't other like electric lights that he could use, the busboy lit a match to see long enough that he could screw the bulb back in. However, the match where he was holding it immediately ignited the dried out palm fronds that were decorating the room and set the room on fire. Like, it went up so fast. Despite the waitstaff's efforts to douse the flames with water, the fire just continued to grow. The ceiling, which was covered in this decorative fabric, i.e. really easily flammable stuff, was quickly engulfed in flames. The fire then raced up the stairway and into the main room, which then ignited a massive fireball thanks to all of the open alcohol in the building. The fire then burst through the main hallway and into some other rooms of the club. And like in 5 minutes, the entire building, this is a giant building, was full of fire and smoke. And this is a packed nightclub, right? Like, we remember there was a nightclub fire, I think in Providence, Rhode Island several years ago, where it was kind of similar to this. Hundreds of people were trapped inside. They're burning alive. And even worse, the revolving door at the front of the building, which was the only way in and out for some reason, got jammed. And so now it looked like everyone, hundreds of people, were going to be trapped inside this fiery oven. But then that is when we find our hero, 21-year-old Coast Guardsman Clifford Johnson, leapt into action, right? Johnson had been in the building with his date. He actually made it out into the street before the door jammed, but he realized his date was nowhere to be found. And here's the thing, like Johnson, he was no ordinary guy from Boston who would have otherwise just like strolled down the street whistling, like pretending like nothing. Oh no, that's so bad. Poor Susie, poor Diana. What's her name? I don't know what accent that is. It's not Boston. I don't know. Whatever. Who cares? Johnson, though, he wasn't like this. Like, he apparently really liked this girl. And so he raced back into the building to try to find her. And like, he wasn't finding her. He made 6 trips into the building and was actually pulling out several survivors along the way, none of which were the girl that he had brought on his date. However, he finally just succumbed to so much smoke inhalation and the heat that he just couldn't get any more people out. However, Clifford did survive, and, so did his date, who had actually made it out alive without him knowing, but she didn't bother to try to find him. Boston. I don't know. I like just dumping all over Boston people, just because it's fun. They some of them are good sports about it. Some of them don't take it very well because they're oblivious. But, Johnson, for his efforts, suffered 3rd-degree burns over half of his body for trying to save this girl who couldn't be bothered to, flag him down and be like, "Hey, Clifford, I'm all right. Let's go get some mouth kisses together." I don't know. I still don't know what accent that is. Johnson, with his burns, spent the next 21 months in the hospital and had to undergo several hundred operations to prevent him from basically looking like Freddy Krueger. Miraculously, all of this giant medical plan was a success. And he was actually considered the most burned person to ever survive up to that point. The Cocoanut Grove fire did, however, kill 492 people, making it the 2nd deadliest building fire in history at the time, behind the 1903 Iroquois Theater fire in Chicago that killed over 600 people. But upon his release from the hospital, Clifford Johnson actually ended up marrying the nurse who had cared for him. Because look, that's an easy love story to make. It's just like, "Oh, how'd you get in here?" And then Clifford's like, "I was trying to save my broad. We was gonna get some mouth kisses in." And then the nurse is like, "Oh my God, you're so sweet. That's so romantic. I wish the socks were this romantic, but they just break my heart every time." I'm trying so hard to find it, and it's not coming there. Anyway, but those two get married. No one really knows what happened to Clifford's original date from the night of the fire, but she apparently had no interest in, being with an extra crispy gentleman at that point. So she just disappears from history. But Johnson was better off with his new nurse wife, and the two moved to Missouri, where they lived happily ever after. And that's not true. I misread my notes. 14 years after the fire, Johnson was involved in a serious car crash in which his vehicle exploded and he burned to death. And I'm not making that up. That is, like, you want to believe in some Final Destination stuff, like, oh, okay, this building didn't get, okay, well, then the universe is just going to crash your car and make it explode, and we're going to kill you by fire anyway. That guy, man. Poor guy. Anyway, our next story here. On August 5th, 1949, a bolt of lightning struck the south side of Man Gulch in Montana, and a wildfire broke out along the Missouri River, specifically in the Gates of the Mountains Wilderness area in Helena National Forest. So obviously in Helena, Montana. James Harrison, not famous Pittsburgh Steelers linebacker, but a different one. This one was a college student at Montana State University, and he was working as a recreation and fire prevention guard at a nearby campground, and actually had to fight the fire by himself for 4 hours, which is really impressive because Western wildfires get so out of control so fast. And this dude was just there for 4 hours by himself doing it. But eventually a crew of 15 smoke jumpers, which were these parachuting firefighters from Missoula, Montana, ended up arriving to join Harrison and fight the fire. The 15 smoke jumpers stood near the top of the gulch and initially watched the fire burn along the opposite ridge toward the Missouri River. Combined with the heat from the fire, the air temperature was at 97 degrees. And to make things worse, the team's radio actually got destroyed because its parachute failed to deploy after being dropped from the plane. So, kind of already at a disadvantage. They have no way of communicating to the outside world if they need help or anything like that. So it's already a bad situation. Well, Wag Dodge, the foreman with the most Wild West sounding name in the group. I mean, Wag Dodge. My name's Wag Dodge. I like guns. And I scalp Indians. 'Cause my name's Wag Dodge. Anyway, I don't know. So stupid. Wag heard a shout coming from the front of the fire, and because he's Wag Dodge, and he's just a manly man, he raced down the mountain toward the fire to see if someone actually needed help. He told the rest of the team to gather up their equipment, have a little snack, get ready, and then head down to cross the Missouri River and start fighting the fire. Dodge ended up finding the noise, which is coming from James Harrison, who by now was clearly losing the battle with the fire. Dodge and Harrison got out of there. They rejoined the rest of the crew and moved down the gulch towards the river. And by now, the fire had actually hopped over the Missouri River and had begun crawling up the other slope, which is not what you want, right? Water, natural enemy of fire, should be a barrier, should stop it. But when the fire is like, nah, fam, and just jumps over the river and starts burning the other side, that's when you have a problem, all right? Obviously, you know how fire works. Even worse, the winds that were blowing through the canyon were pushing the flames up the ridge and into a swath of dry grass, which, you don't want that. It's bad enough that the ground is on fire, but then you get this dry grass that's already blown in the wind that's going to create even more fire. And then what happened next is what people in the fire industry call a blow up, in that the fire just exploded in size in just a matter of seconds, right? It was a little, it was just kind of like this, advancing small line of fire, and then it hits this grass, and now you have these gigantic flames that are being blown up and around the ridge by the wind, and it's massive. So Dodge realized that he and the rest of his men were effectively screwed at this point, and he ordered everyone to drop everything they were carrying and run for their lives up the slope of this mountain, which was sitting at a convenient thigh incinerating 37-degree angle, right? And you got to run up that. I don't know. I don't know what angle stairs are at, but it's got to be pretty similar. Right. And so you're just running stairs, except there's no stairs. So it's just like a smooth slope that you're struggling to get grip of. And so that's pretty difficult. Especially because I imagine that, especially out in Montana, you get out that way, especially up in the mountains, if there's no grass there, it's just this rocky, sandy soil. And so it's going to be loose already. And so just now it's even harder to run up the hill. The Inferno, however, not weighed down by anything, no protective equipment, nothing, but was also being aided by strong winds, raced up the incline towards them, and they are getting chased by this wall of fire. Dodge eventually realized they're not going to make it. And so with this massive fire less than 100 yards away, he grabbed a match and set the dry grass in front of them on fire. Now, maybe if you're unfamiliar about how firefighting works, it's the whole idea of fight fire with fire, right? It's pretty simple concept because if everything in front of you is burned already, then you don't have to worry about getting burned, but also any fire coming up behind you won't have anything new to burn and therefore will either flame out or slow down to where you can get away. The backdraft from the fire behind them sent Dodge's new fire racing up the hill ahead of them, right? So this fire behind them is so big that it's pushing air and creating this massive gust of wind that's blowing up the hill. And so Wag Dodge, he lights this fire in front of him, ignites the grass in front of him, and then that wind pushes that new fire up the ridge. And so Dodge's men, they had no idea what he was doing. They thought that Dodge had lost his mind and was just trying to kill everybody. But two men, Robert Sally and Walter Rumsey, kept running, and they made it to the top of the ridge and were able to kind of squeeze through a rock crevice to safety where they weren't going to get burned. Two others, William Hellman and Joseph Sylvia, initially made it to the ridge, but they couldn't find a place to, find cover. They were worn out, and the fire just overtook them, and they got killed. The other 10 men didn't even make it up the ridge, and they were overtaken by the fire. Meanwhile, Dodge actually stopped running up the ridge, and he actually kind of sat down in the escape fire that he set. And basically what this did, and this is where I have no idea how this works, but basically within that second fire that he set, it created this thin layer of oxygen that he then used to protect himself as the massive main inferno actually essentially jumped over him and continued up the ridge. The gust from the flames that, and the way it was moving the air was actually so powerful that it was lifting him up into the air on multiple occasions, which is crazy how that works, right? Either way, it all worked out. And after the fire had moved on to other portions of the forest and was causing a ton of damage, Dodge gathered himself up and walked back to safety. And so I don't know if, kind of a hero in that he saved a couple of people, but the ones who died, were not practicing fire safety. He saved James Harrison, or no, actually he didn't end up saving James Harrison. He ended up dying, but he saved two of them, 3 out of 16 is not bad, I guess. Maybe it is. Anyway, our final story here happened on July 15th, 1976, when a group of 26 students in summer school were returning from a field trip at the Chowchilla Fairgrounds swimming pool in Chowchilla, California, kind of Northern California area. When the bus they were in came upon a broken down van. Now, Ed Ray, who was the bus driver, stopped to see if the people in the van were okay. And at that point, that was a mistake because 3 armed men jumped out of the van and boarded the bus and demanded that everyone get off. The kids and the bus driver were then placed in 2 other vans that had arrived on the scene and were driven around for 11 hours, which I don't know why they did that, before they were ultimately taken to a quarry near the town of Livermore, which was over 100 miles away from where they initially stopped. When they all arrived at the quarry, the vans were then unloaded and everyone was stuffed inside of an old moving truck that had been lined with mattresses and stocked with a small amount of food. The kidnappers then buried the van beneath loose rocks and dirt from the quarry, and were basically going to like try to get a bunch of ransom money. But Ed Ray, like, none of that mattered to him, right? For one thing, he got them in this position anyway because he's such a good dude and was trying to help these stranded people in the first place. But whatever, now he's got to get them out of this situation. With the prisoners in place, right, kidnappers tried to call in their ransom. They hoped to get as much as $5 million from what they thought were wealthy families of these kids. But the phone lines to the Chowchilla Police Department kept returning a busy signal because all of the parents were calling in to report their missing children, right? Because it's been 11 hours since they were initially kidnapped, and they were supposed to be home like probably 10 hours ago, and no one's there. And so like all these parents are freaking out. They're calling the police to try to figure out what's up. And so the kidnappers can't actually do their job, which I think is funny. That's poor planning on their part. Back at the quarry, right, Ed quickly gave up on just kind of waiting around and hoping that the police would find them. And so he began stacking these mattresses that were lining the sides of the truck so that he could reach the opening in the ceiling of the truck, right? Because most moving trucks have like a little opening in the trailer area that, you know, you can escape out of or whatever the case is. However, the opening had been covered with 2 100-pound industrial batteries, right? But when you got that adrenaline going and you're just, you hulk out, dude. Like, and so he was able to push enough to open up the escape hatch partially so that he could wedge the lid open with a stick, and then he was more easily able to move the batteries out of the way. So after then moving away the rest of the rocks and the dirt, Ed and the children broke out of the truck nearly 16 hours after they had been thrown inside. Like, that's how long it took him to move that stuff out of the way. He then walked the entire group up to the guardhouse of the quarry, who, like, what are you doing, right? Like, whoever's manning the guardhouse, clearly not doing their job, and was like really surprised to see this dude and a bunch of kids just show up, and was like, hey, we've been kidnapped and we were buried alive down here in the quarry. Can you help us? Like, how do you go to work that day anticipating anything like that happening, right? But they were quickly rescued. They were returned to Chowchilla, where they were originally from. By the time the kids had been returned to their parents, the kidnappers were obviously nowhere to be found. Their plan didn't work. They bailed. But Ed was not done being a hero. They ran this giant investigation to try to find the kidnappers. And one of the things they did was they put Ed under hypnosis. And during that, he actually remembered one of the license plates on one of the vans. The van was actually registered to the son of the quarry owner, Frederick Woods, who then obviously they were quickly able to track this kid down in Vancouver, Canada. His 2 accomplices, Richard and James Schoenfield, surrendered to police shortly after word got out that they had been identified. All 3 men were ultimately sentenced to life in prison. Now, because it's California, right, many of the children suffered traumatic side effects long after this kidnapping took place, right? And like for the next 25 years, these kids reported like developing intense fears of like cars, darkness, wind, the kitchen. One kid even reported a fear of hippies, and that was somehow associated to this kidnapping. I don't know, man. Like, California does a lot of great work, you know, kind of progressing human society, but in a lot of ways they go a little too far. And I think this is like one of those things for me where it's like, you know, like, I don't know how you make that logical connection between being kidnapped for 16 hours, like, you know, stuffed inside a truck for 16 hours, and then being irrationally afraid of hippies. Like, I don't know, maybe one of the kidnappers looked like a hippie. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. It's just weird. One victim later in life actually ended up shooting a Japanese tourist with a BB gun after that tourist car broke down in front of his house. So like he started having like PTSD flashbacks, like, oh no, they're not really broken down. They're just waiting for me to come out and kidnap me again. Cause I'm still this sweet little 12-year-old that needs to be kidnapped and ransomed. And so they like fired, just like shooting him off. It's just crazy. Ed, on the other hand, ended up being celebrated as just this huge hero throughout the town of Chowchilla. He received a California School Employees Association citation for outstanding community service, which I don't know. A citation to me sounds kind of like a warning or a punishment, not like an award, but whatever. I don't understand how California works, man. February 26th was also declared Ed Ray Day in Chowchilla, and he ended up just living out the rest of his life before he died in 2012. So there you go. Some stories of some true heroes in the books. I don't know if you can hear in the background. This microphone probably isn't picking it up, but I'm recording with my window open because it's a nice day out. It's a little rainy. It's very relaxing. But my neighbor across the street is like a weird dude. And like he has this, like, I don't know if it's a security system or something or what on his car, but it's like a voice thing. And for the last several minutes, it has just been, it's been saying vibration sensor filing. Like, I don't even know what that means. Those three words back to back to back mean nothing to me. It's just, and it's annoying. And it's every day with this guy. And it just, turn it off. Turn it off, dude. Like, and like, also, like his like porch and garage lights, like turn on and off at like at 30-second intervals. Oh, good. He's leaving now. Thank God. But yeah, just a weird dude, just a real weird dude. Like, and that's saying something. Cause like, look, here's like, we've got weird, quirky things on our house, but we're not disrupting the neighborhood with your dumb, like voice activated truck. Right. Anyway, that's beside the point. What did we learn today?
What did we learn?
I hope he heard me talking about him. Anyway, number one, Clifford Johnson, great Boston guy, super chivalrous, trying to rescue his lady. She was nowhere to be found, but saved a bunch of other people from a devastating nightclub fire in Boston. Number two, Wag Dodge, mountain man firefighter. Kind of saved the day. Saved himself and two other firefighters who tried to take out a wildfire in Montana. Didn't necessarily work. It was really just a cool fire story, if we're being honest, right? And then number three, Ed Ray saved a group of 26 students after he accidentally got them abducted, but broke them out of the quarry that they were trapped in and ended up saving the day. Next week on Our Weird World, getting back into the awful things, awful subject matter that you know and love. We're looking at three people who died very awful deaths. Like just, not like just, oh, they got shot and get, like this was horrific, right? So we're going to look at the stories of Arius, Marco Antonio Bragadin, and Giorgi Doja. I think that's how you say his name. I don't know, but that's what's going to be on the table for next week. Thank you all for continuing to listen. Keep telling all your friends and keep it weird. Back in the day, Potts Farm was the place to go. Load the truck up, hit the dirt road, jump the barbed wire, spread the word, light the bonfire, then call the girls. The King in the Can and the Marlboro Man, Jack and Jim were a few good men. Where you learned how to kiss and cuss and fight too, better watch out for the boys in blue. And all this small town, he said, she said, Ain't it funny how the rumors spread? Like I know something y'all don't know. Man, that talk is getting old. You better mind your business, man. Watch your mouth before I have to knock that loud mouth out. I'm tired of talking, man. Y'all ain't listening. Them old dirt roads is what y'all missing. I sit back and think about them good old days, the way we were raised in our southern ways, and we like cornbread and biscuits, and if it's broke round here, we fix it. I can take y'all where you need to go, down to my hood back in them woods. We do it different round here, that's right, but we sure do it good, and we do it all night. See, if you really want to know how it feels to get off the road with trucks and four wheels, jump on in and man, tell your friends we'll raise some hell where the blacktop ends. Yeah, I'm chillin' on a dirt road, laid back swerving like I'm George Jones, smoke rolling out the window, an ice cold beer sittin' in the console. Memory lane up in the headlights, it's got me reminiscing on them good times. I'm turning off of real life driving, that's right. I'm hitting easy street on mud tires. Let's ride.